Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Josiah Elgin-Fritz. I'm one of the solution architects on the professional services team here at Decisions, and I'll be leading the Lunch and Learn today. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor. If anyone's got any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat or put them in the Q&A panel, or come off mute, and I'll be happy to answer. All right, we've got a question here. If I've got a form that has a drop-down list of users from a group, once this form is submitted, it goes to the next form, which needs to be assigned to the user picked from the previous drop-down. How can I do this? All right, that is a great question. So what you're going to want to do here is have your drop-down be sourced from the actual group or list of accounts. There's a step that we can use to get all of the users from a group. Then we can pass that list into our dropdown, and we can have the output from that be the person that the next form is assigned to. And I can actually, I'll show an example of what that'll look like to set up. So let me switch over to my decision screen here. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to create a quick flow here. And in this flow, the first thing that we'll want to do is to get our list of accounts for a particular group. So to do that, I'm going to go to integration, and then I'm going to go to internal services, and then I'm going to go to the group service. And this is going to give us the steps that allow us to interact with a group. So I can say, I want to get, let's see, get accounts for group. So I'll start with that step here. This step is going to ask me for a group ID. So if you don't know the ID of the group or you want to fetch a particular group, you could do some other steps to get that ID. For now, I'm just going to set that to use this step here. The next thing that I'll do is I will create a quick form here to have our drop down. Let me put a show form step in here, and I will create a quick form. And on this, I'm going to put a drop down list. Put a button on here. This drop-down list, I'm going to set to type account. Now, I could do this two ways. I could either set this to have the whole account object, or I could have this to take in a list of strings like the email address of the account. When I'm assigning a form, I can either assign it using an account object or using an email address or an account ID. So depending on what you want to do with your dropdown here and how much data you actually need about the account, might determine how you're going to set this up. Let's say that you've just got, your flow is happening and you're not actually querying decisions to get you the list of accounts for a particular group. You just have a list of email addresses. You can do the same thing here. But I'm going to say that this is going to be an account. Now, because this is a composite type, I need to set a display field here for what's going to actually show on my dropdown. So in this case, I want it to be the email address. So I'll pick the email address there. The source, I'm going to say this is going to be a data name. So I'm going to call this list of accounts. And I'm going to say that the output here is going to be selected account. And it's going to be required for my outcome button. So I'm going to keep this form pretty simple looking. So I'll go ahead and close that. And now the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to say the list of accounts that I'm passing in here, I'm going to say select from flow, and that's going to be the output of my get accounts for groups step. And then the selected account, I'm going to say ignore because I haven't selected one yet. Now, the next part of this is going to be I want to actually assign the next form in the process to the user that I've just selected here. So I'm going to put another form in here, and we'll select that. And I'm actually just going to reuse the form that I just made for this. But this one, I'm going to make an assigned form. So I'm going to say this is assigned, and it's going to ask me who I need to assign it to. Now, this assigned to is a static thing. I could type in here, Josiah, and it's going to give me my account there. And now every time this flow runs, it's assigned to that user. I can do the same thing with a group. In this case, I want this to be dynamic. So I'm going to say I don't want to assign it to that user. I do need to give this an assigned name here. So I'm just going to do a constant. and give it an action name. Now I'm going to come in here to assignment setup. And when I say edit there, it's going to give me more options of what I can actually do as far as setting this thing up. So here we've got the accounts and groups. I can pass in some data here to who I'm going to assign this thing to. So I'm going to say here, this is taking in a list. So I'm going to do build array. And then I'm going to do select from flow for the first item here. And I'm going to say my selected account, and I'm going to give it the email address of this account. And now that thing is set up that this assignment will get assigned to whoever the selected email from this first form is. So let me just map a couple more things here and we can give this a test. And I want to also get an ID from one of my groups so that I can actually assign this to someone and get the list of users. Let me get a group ID here real quick. And I'm just going to use the administrators group here, which the ID for that is administrators group. One of the few things that has an ID that's not a GUID in decisions. So now we've got that put together. Let's go ahead and test this flow. So I'm going to debug it. And if I look here, so I'm going to get my form. If I look at the output of my step here, I can see all of the groups that got passed out. So I've got 3 items in that administrators group. So if I come to my dropdown, I would expect to see that. And I can see here, here's the 3 accounts that are in that administrators group as the options for my dropdown. I'm going to select my account. I'm going to complete this form, and you can see I now have gotten this task assigned to me. So I've got this assignment, and it's assigned to me because I'm the one that was selected in that previous form, and that's what got passed in for the assignment. And if I look at this in here, I can actually see in the settings what got passed into that accounts and groups list is that email address that I selected from the dropdown. All right, does that answer the question around setting that up? Any follow-up there or anything that wasn't clear about how I set that process up? All right, perfect. So next question. There's a page where you'd like to display a chart with 30-day totals for a folder entity. Totals are stored in a data structure that stores totals for multiple folder entities. The page already includes a value called PoolId, pulls in the URL. The report shows the totals for the last 30 days. It's grouped by day so that all charts show daily totals. The daily totals for all. Is it possible to filter the report for the PoolId? The value of the selection bus is also stored in the database. Okay, Ross, if you don't mind, can you come off mute and maybe give me a little bit of clarifying what you're looking for there? So you want to filter a report based on the selection bus value PoolId, correct? I think maybe I have to move you off mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Hey, how you doing, first of all?
Good, how are you?
Good to talk to you again. So yeah, at a very base level, I have a GUID that's put in the URL called PoolId. I have a report that runs a daily total for PoolId based on PoolId of some value that gets summed up, and I store the daily totals in a separate data structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this for multiple pools. And I'm trying to filter by one pool at a time so I can create a chart and show a running 30-day chart for that pool on its page.
Okay. Is the pool ID a field on the data that you're reporting on?
Yes.
Okay. So you should, in that case, you should be able to filter that. So what you would do is in the report editor, you would set up, you'd put a filter on the report and set it to, you know, you'd set it for that field. So in this case, pool ID, and you'd say pool ID equals as the filter, and then you would set the.
So I have the pool ID. I have a filter name called pool ID.
Okay. And do you have it set to get values from other reports?
I do.
Okay.
And then I have the value name pool ID.
Okay.
Or is that, do I not fill in the value field?
So you shouldn't need to fill in the value field there. You do want the filter name should be pool ID instead of pool ID equals.
Well, I'm hoping this is just as simple as that I filled in the value and I shouldn't have been. Okay, so I've got that done. It's still giving me no data in the chart. So then I have a chart on the page.
And you have a chart on the page, and the chart is populated from the report, correct?
That's right.
The chart should reflect the same filter of the report. Let's set up an example real quick and see if we can work through why it's not showing for you. So let me create a report really quick. And I'm going to, I will just set this up on the account data source. And we'll do account ID. And where is email address? There we go. All right, so we'll set that up. I'm going to go ahead and group this by account ID so that we can build a chart off of it. I'll add a chart here. And you're using, what kind of chart are you using, Ross?
Just lines.
Just a line chart? Perfect.
Well, I figured out one reason. It's not throwing it into the URL by default. It's only when I change the value on the page that it then.
So when the page loads initially, it doesn't have one in until you select something from the report that sends that value in? Correct.
Well, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm not sure, that it's even doing that. That's bizarre. Let me check one other place.
All right, there we've got a simple line chart. We'll add it in. Did you get it working?
Yeah, I think I figured out the problem. It's not getting thrown up into the selection bus. So I think, what's the step? I know what's the step that puts something up there?
The step is, I can never remember the name of the step.
Isn't like get page folder or something, or like get page data?
Dashboard parameters, I think. Let me open up a flow and search for it really quick.
Wouldn't get page variable work too, Josiah?
Well, that doesn't set one. Set dashboard report parameters. And you give it the folder ID of where the dashboard is that you're currently looking at, and you can set parameters in here that you want to pass that data as.
Okay.
So if you're sending the data from a flow to that report filter, this is what you'd be using. If you're sending it from, like, you're clicking a selection in a row, you would do it by selecting the column in the row that you want to send the data and tell it to use that as the source for another thing. Let me show you what that looks like real quick. So if I came in here to account ID and I wanted this report to send the account ID to the service bus so that other things could pick it up, I would use this option here that says send data as filter change. And then this, I would set this to be whatever that filter name is. So in your case, that would be pool ID. And then when you click a row in this report, if this report is also on that dashboard, it will send that account ID into the URL as pool ID, and the other report can get it from there.
Yeah, that I've done.
Okay.
I think the root cause here is actually just that, okay, so pool ID is not getting into my selection bus or into my URL. So, okay, that takes care of it, I think. I can pick it up there. Yeah, cool, thanks.
All righty. All right, we've got another question here. All right, if I have a flow that is called as an API and return data, which could in theory be formatted as a CSV, it's returned as plain text, how do I convert that into a CSV and then work with that CSV in the exact same flow? So in this case, Joshua, are you wanting to return it as an actual CSV file?
So right, so the text comes down so I'm querying I'm querying a Tableau API. It's just responds with a table. It responds with a table of data, comma separated. But but Tableau being Tableau, it returns text. And it will format everything as text. So even so if you have a number like 10,000, it won't just give you 1000 necessarily. It will give you 10, comma 000. It will enclose that in quotes. So in order to work with it the best way, right? So I can sort of get down to the cell that I need or whatever. It seems best to sort of try to get into some sort of CSV format and then work with that through the rest of the flow. But I mean, for the question that I have a workaround around is exactly what I'm working with. So, but this is for the next time if I ever need to actually work with the whole table of data. Is there a quick way to parse this stream of data that comes in a CSV format?
So it returns it. It always returns it back as that block of text. It doesn't have Tableau doesn't give you any option to return it as an object, like a JSON type object or something like that.
I don't think so.
If Tableau would give it to you as a JSON or an XML, you could actually you could build a data type for it in Decisions, and instead of working with it as a CSV file, work with it as a list of that object. As far as transforming it from the text, if it gives it to you as a blob of text and it puts a number as text in quotes.
So so in that case, I can't separate by comma because you're separate by comma.
Right. So you could split it. I think you would have to build a flow to kind of parse that data out.
Okay.
Because Decisions wouldn't be able to identify that number because it's not in a pure number CSV format. Decisions would need you to tell it, hey, this thing is a number here. So you could, there are some ways that you could split that data up. You could do a split by new line, which would give you, actual, a text string then of every line, and then you could do a split string and tell it to split on quote, comma, quote, so that you would not get quotes that are or commas that are in the middle of some data, but you would then still need to build some type of process to actually go through that data and say, hey, at this position, we know that this thing is meant to be a number and not text.
Right. Okay. I was just wondering if there's no way I can take because there's a step that says list to CSV. So I was thinking that I could break on new line and then I have a list and then I could just take that list and
So the list to CSV step is expecting a list of Decisions objects. So it expects it to be in some type of object form already.
Not a string, you're saying.
Exactly, not a string.
Okay. I see. Got it.
And then you had a second question. If you have an API and you expect to get an Excel file as a response, how do you ingest that Excel file and work with it in the same flow? So in that case, the format of the data coming back is what? Is it giving you like a byte array or actual file data?
An actual file data, as far as I can understand from the documentation.
Okay, so if it's giving it to you as file data, what you could do in that flow then is take that file data and give it to, there are some steps that will actually give you, what you would do is you basically convert it into an object in decisions and work with it that way instead of in the
Okay.
Excel file. And the steps to do that would be either, there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's a for each CSV row, I believe. All of the steps that have CSV in the name work for both a CSV file or an Excel file. It's a
Okay.
setting on the step. So there's a for each CSV row, which you give it a file and it works like a regular loop, except it loops through the rows in the file. That's one of the least performant ways. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one unless you have a specific need to loop through them.
Yeah, is there something in the method that I set up for the API call itself though that tells it I'm gonna get back a file? I tried specifying, in the drop, the advanced drop downs or whatever.
That you want it to come back as a file.
Yeah, it's the response is a file. That's sort of what I was getting stuck on. It didn't seem to. It just sort of gave me, like if you ever open up like an Excel file in Notepad++, just turns to gibberish. So that's sort of where I was at. I was up at the gibberish stage, but
let's see. We've got.
So
I think if you give it, I think if you give it, set it to binary.
Okay.
And
okay,
that'll let you get it back as a file.
Okay, I'll try. I'll give that a shot. Okay. Great. Thank you. We gotta check to see if they can respond in the JSON format.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Very helpful.
All right. What other questions do you guys have today? All right. Jimmy, you've got a question?
Yeah, so say I'm populating a drop down with some list values and I'm going and selecting my input. Does it matter when I select my object, if I do the all items as array or if I just select the object?
When you're selecting, sorry, can you repeat that question? When you've got a drop down and you're passing in.
I'm passing in the data, and when I'm mapping in the input, when I select the input value, and then the next one is all items as array. Does it matter if I select that all items as array?
So you'd be here, and then where is that? That's I know what field you're talking about.
Right there.
Yeah.
Down.
So here you would, like in this case, you just need to select that list of accounts.
So it doesn't matter if you select all items as array, it doesn't really do anything.
No, it shouldn't. I'm actually curious.
Right there.
Yeah, you can see like that gives you the list of accounts. I would just do the root level there.
Okay.
I would just do this one instead of the dot all items as array, because that is going to be the array of this array.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see any difference when I was selecting it, but I didn't know what was the better method of doing.
Yep, I think this will be what you're looking for there.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. What other questions? got a question. How do you, or is it possible to play an audio file on a form? So the way that you would want to do this, if you want to play an audio file, is going to be the same way if you want to display a video file. There is a component on a form called, I think it's video. Yes. There's a video control component here. You can either point this to a URL that you want to have playing here, or you can say that it's going to come from file data and have this either be passed in or set on the, if I change this to not is static, it'll give me a data name. And so I can pass in a file here. Now the control is a video player, but it does also work as an audio player. If you want to give it an audio file instead of a video file, that will also work. And so that'll allow you, if you have a need to play an audio file on a form, or if you want to play a video file, you can do that here. There's also an option here if you want to show the controls. That'll be things like the play, pause, forward, backwards controls. All right, other questions? Jimmy, do you have another question? It looked like your hand just went up again.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know could unmute. Does that audio file play if it's a hidden object, if you hide it?
If you hide it, I believe it will still play if you turn the visibility off on the control.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yes, I believe that it should, but double check that. I haven't used this recently, so I'm not entirely sure, but I believe that it will still play if it's not shown. All right, and then Ross, you're still having some trouble getting the ID into the URL?
Yeah, so I'm running, when I load the page, I stuck the set dashboard parameters step in a tile flow, and it's not putting it in the URL.
So the set dashboard parameter step is one of the few steps that sends data between components on a dashboard that doesn't actually put it into the URL. Most things, when you change those, it will send it to the URL, but that step won't actually show in the URL, but it can still send data into another report. So in this case, why would it not?
So it's not sending it, like I'm still getting no data in my chart.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me see here. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to change this flow a little bit here. I'm going to put our set dashboard parameter step in here. Let me go back to this report. All right, I'm going to add a filter for our account ID. It's going to be at the top because it's alphabetical. That makes sense. And I want this to be, I want this to be get values from other reports. We've got our line chart there. That's all looks good.
So I can't add line charts in my report. I can only do it on the page. Are we just on different versions?
What version are you on?
Like probably, hold on, let me get out of this window.
You should.
I'm on 6.16.
Okay, then you should be able to. So the line chart that you've created, your line chart is based on a report in some way, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's basically like I'm setting this up as the report for the line chart. You with me so far?
I do have line chart in there. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. I just did it a different way.
Okay, so we've got our report here. I'm going to create a new page. And let me put, I'm going to put the report on here. I'm actually going to put it on here twice because I want to see it with the data and with the chart. All right, and then I'm going to also add in here a flow run part to send that data. So when this flow runs, it should send our value over to the report. So,
Yeah, and I'm doing it in a flow run part as well. So hopefully I can see what I'm doing wrong here.
all right, so let me add this page to the folder here. All right, and then I will set up that set dashboard parameters. The folder ID that I want to send it to is going to be our folder here. And I want that to be account ID. And what is, I'll put this in here as the account ID. All right, so that should give us the data there. We'll go to our page here, and that is sending it through to the report, and it looks like it's sending it through to the chart.
All right, let me
So
double.
is your page being displayed on a folder?
It's my page. Yes.
Okay, because that some of the things for sending data between things can get a little wonky if you're just trying to view the page by itself. As long as it's on a folder, you should be fine.
Wait, I don't know how to view a page not on a folder. So what? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're asking.
No. If you went to a folder and turned the page on and said add page.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the way that you should do it.
Yeah.
All right, so then your dashboard parameter, is it set up something like this?
Yep. Let me double. Okay, so let's see. Let me go into my flow run part. Set dashboard parameter. I've got the folder ID. I'm going to make sure I'm using the right folder ID. Let's see. Let's go to this one. That's the one I'm manage. Get designer folder ID. Still not coming through. All right, I'm in the flow run part. I have set dashboard parameters. I'm calling it PoolId with a.
Is the casing the same between how you have it set up on the set dashboard report parameters and on the report that has it as the filter?
I thought it was, but let's do a cut and paste just to make sure. Daily. Copy from there. Paste there. Yep. So that was right. Cut and pasted the folder ID as well as the value. Let's save everything, just make sure it got saved. It's not coming through.
Are there any other filters on your report that could potentially be causing it to not show any data after you?
Fair. There's a date range one that just says make sure that the day is younger than 31 days old, so it's a rolling total. But let me delete that just to.
I guess the other thing we could try, just to troubleshoot if the report is getting the value incorrectly, is in your URL, you can actually add the parameter there. So if you do, and pool ID equals and the ID that you want to test with, and just type that into the URL, and then hit enter and make it load the page with that in there, and see if the report filters on it, because that'll at least give us an indication if the issue is with the report not showing data properly, or if it's with the parameter not getting sent properly.
That's a good idea. Let's try that. And pool ID equals. Well, it's still, I did that and it still says no data. So
Okay,
there's
so it
something
might be
else going
something
on.
with the report then, is for some reason not giving the data we expect it to.
But when I take off, okay, so hold on, well, and then let's do this. So when I go in the report, if I take off the pool ID filter, I have all my data. So I go to add filter, I do a field filter for pool ID, and I want pool ID equals. And I change the filter name to pool ID.
If you, in just the report editor there, now that you've got that pool ID filter, leave it as the default, not runtime editable, and just put the ID in there directly. Does it show you data?
Oh, put that in the value.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that actually filters data correctly.
That does, okay. So that should show you the data. Okay. So now that you've got the filter set up, let's go ahead and run it on the page again and try putting it in the parameter direct, like typing the parameter into the URL.
Okay. And I don't want to monopolize other people's time if there's other questions, but as long as we have time to kill. All right, so I did that. I refreshed the page with the pool ID in the URL. Now it worked.
Awesome.
Okay. So now I got to see if it works without the pool ID in the URL.
Right, yeah. So now let's try doing it to the set dashboard report parameters.
And it still worked.
Awesome.
Okay, so it was something with that filter.
Sounds like it.
All right, we're working. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions? All right, it doesn't look like I've got any more coming through. So if no one else has any other questions for today, I'll let you all go, and we'll be back again tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Yep, have a great day, everyone.